this was not the plan. The events of this week, my life experiences this week were definitely not the way I had planned them. When Adam and I began our chicken keeping adventure in May, I had never even crossed my mind that one day I might have to syringe feed my rooster every 3 to 4 hours, and that he would be very sick. Well, I mean, of course, I also did not anticipate having a rooster. That was not the plan. We bought 4 female chicks. That's what I paid for, was 4 female chicks. I expected to then have 4 hens. Instead, we have a rooster named Beyonce. So I certainly didn't expect that, nor did I expect Beyonce to fall ill, and probably most people wouldn't invest that much maybe in a rooster that they didn't want. But I can't help it. And so I love that little guy. And so we had a rough week, and we weren't sure he was going to make it. And thanks in great part to Fabian Morales for his expertise and showing me how to nurse him and all of those things. I think, maybe you could say a prayer, I think Beyonce will pull through and recover. But I can say with certainty, that was not part of the plan. I imagine that Mary had plenty of opportunity to say, this was not part of the plan. This was not the plan that she had for her life. When she dreamed as a little girl of what would happen one day and to whom she would be given in marriage and you know, how many children they would have and a happy household and where they'd live. And I am sure that what happened had not been part of the plan. And even though she accepted that responsibility, that role, the new plan, she did so graciously and willingly as a servant of God. You know, still, I think she would have had moments where she would have said, yeah, like this wasn't part of the plan. This couldn't have been part of the plan. Like, I'm thinking especially when the Roman soldiers marched into Nazareth and said, all right, everybody, compulsory attendance at your family's property for tax enrollment. Get going. And she was 9 months pregnant and had to make a somewhere around 5 to 9 day journey by foot. It was likely by foot. There may have been a donkey. We don't know. That's not actually in the text, but that became kind of church tradition early on, and it certainly was a possibility. But I don't think it really matters if you're 9 months pregnant, whether you walk for 5 days or ride on a donkey. I mean, probably either way is quite miserable. Mary had to have said at some point, you know, this was not the plan. And then, when they get to Bethlehem, circumstances are less than ideal. This is how Luke tells it, rather sparsely. In the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 2. In those days, Caesar Augustus declared that everyone throughout the empire should be enrolled in the tax lists. This first enrollment occurred when Quirinius governed Syria. Everyone went to their own cities to be enrolled. Since Joseph belonged to David's house and family line, he went up from the city of Nazareth in Galilee to David's city called Bethlehem in Judea. He went to be enrolled together with Mary, who was promised to him in marriage, not actually married yet, promised to him in marriage, and who was pregnant. While they were there, the time came for Mary to have her baby. She gave birth to her firstborn child, a son, wrapped him snugly, and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the guest room. Let us hear what the Spirit is speaking to God's people. That, she must have said, cannot have been part of the plan. I mean, we take this unwanted journey in the first place to Bethlehem. We finally arrive there, and our accommodations are not exactly conducive to a healthy start for our baby. The language that you may recall having heard, an older translation, and well, you know how sometimes when stories get told and retold and retold and retold, they start morphing a little bit, and then sometimes things that were not in the original story then get stuck. It stays that way, even though that wasn't the original part. That's the way with this word that our Common English Bible has translated guest room, which I think is the more accurate and appropriate, than inn. Because especially for us in, these last couple centuries, inn means a place that is set aside for travelers to stop, and there's a person that owns it and rents out rooms. They did not have that in the first century in that area. That was not a thing. Hospitality was so much a part of their culture, and to be honest, they didn't have a whole lot of need for places that people would stop and travel because they were largely nomadic anyway. They brought their own equipment and camped and stayed. And when they did get to towns, it was the culture that people, relatives or not, would shelter them, provide them food and such. In fact, we're a family, we're someone not to extend hospitality when a random traveler showed up at your door, no matter what the time. It would have been very disgraceful for you to have turned that person away. Now, how then did we get into this situation in Bethlehem? If Mary and Joseph are going to Joseph's hometown, which was, as we've talked about the last couple of weeks, that he was probably living in Bethlehem just months before. If they're going back there, which actually would have probably been the more typical thing to do, because a new young couple would get married, would likely start out in the husband's family home. They would just add on a room, And they would stay there until, he was able to purchase his own home, find new land, or take over, the inheritance, the family property and such. So if they're going to Bethlehem, and Joseph has just lived there not long ago, why are they not at Joseph's house with the other family? So this word that got translated as in, very poorly, long ago, is, in Greek, it's kataluma. And it's used one other place in the Gospels when Jesus instructs his disciples to go make preparations for the Passover that they are going to share together. He asks them to secure a place, a kataluma, in which they can celebrate what turns out to be their Last Supper. So what it really means, then, is in the first century average home, there would be one big main space. Living room, kitchen, family room, dining room, extra bedroom, all in one. One big space. There may also be a small room for parents to sleep. And then there would be another room that was like, and sometimes depending on the geography, we mentioned that Mary's home might have been this way, Joseph's might have as well, been built into kind of a terraced hillside. And so sometimes it would be up on another level. There would be the kataluma, which would be the room where typically the children would sleep. But of course, when you have guests, the children give up their room to the guests. I mean, like, we still do that, so that's kind of understandable. So we have this case. It says there's no room in the guest room. We can imagine if there are other family members who've had to travel back, the house might have been especially full. We don't know how many other people, were in that space. We don't know how big it was. We don't know that kind of logistics. But I think we can assume that there were other people occupying the space. And whereas perhaps in maybe other circumstances, you would go, oh yeah, come on, we can squeeze another person or two, move your sleeping bags. In normal circumstances, they might have done that. In these circumstances, nobody wanted to clean up after childbirth, and that would have been pretty awkward in the guest room. So I'm guessing they were like, maybe, how about you stay in the garage? It's still covered. It'll work. We're just, chock full. The stable was also attached to the family home, and it would be a room, possibly open to the outside, without maybe a door or doorway like others. But it would be where you kept your donkey, where you parked your donkey, or kept, your goats or chickens, family animals that gave milk or meat. That's where they would be. But it probably, it was attached to the home. It was a room. That's the accommodations that Mary and Joseph end up in. She had to be thinking, this was not the plan. This could not have been the plan. This was not my plan. Was not how she would have chosen, I'm sure, for her baby to enter the world. to have to share it with the goats and put her baby not in a crib or some other secure sleeping place, but instead in the feeding trough, the manger. We all end up on unwanted journeys sometimes. We've all experienced when, things don't go as planned. And maybe we've experienced a job loss, or then getting a new job that is not where we really would have preferred it to be, and we have to move away from family, states away. Many have experienced unwanted journeys of grief through divorce or the loss of parents or spouse or children. Sometimes unwanted journeys come in the form of a diagnosis, an illness, cancer, and you find yourself somewhere where you never intended to be, maybe never even thought you could be, never gave it a thought, and there you are saying, this was not the plan. There's lots of examples in the Bible of people who experienced unwanted journeys. For example, Joseph, son of Jacob, sold into slavery by his very own brothers. That was not something he planned on, not a journey he wanted to take part in. There was when Hannah, who had been childless, unable to conceive, just wants a son so badly that she prays and she promises God, if you give me this baby, I will give him back to you. He will be in your service in the temple. And she conceives, she has Samuel, and she has her baby boy for a few years, and then has to give him to the priest. And he grows up in the temple, and she gets to see him once or twice a year. Yes, she has a son, but that is probably not what she planned. Not the thing she really wanted. There's King David, who finds himself on the run. Before he was made king, he was on the run from Saul, the king, who he had been in his court just moments before, but Saul was not all well, and David finds himself taking shelter among the Philistines. The ones that he was just fighting against. The one of whom Goliath came to battle, those Philistines. I bet he said this was not the plan. There's many more. Each time though, that unwanted journey was not the end of the story. God brought something good, something new, something wonderful from that unwanted journey. God took that unwanted journey of Joseph's into slavery, into Egypt, into trouble with his master and getting thrown in prison to getting then brought into the court of the king, the Pharaoh, and then in a position of power when his brothers, the very same who sold him into slavery, show up at the door because their land is in famine. But he had prepared Egypt, and they had plenty. Joseph said, I get it. I get it now. What you guys did because you were selfish and didn't like me and just mean, terrible brothers, God used for good. God used to rescue our whole family. Our unwanted journeys are not the end of the story. And sometimes it's really hard to see that when you are in the middle of the unwanted journey, when you can't even tell that there is an end to this unwanted journey, where you're just in a place you didn't plan to be, don't want to be, and are miserable. Even there, the unwanted journey can be redeemed. That's what God does. Takes those unwanted journeys, takes those things that happen in our lives, the awful, terrible things even. Sometimes they're things that other people have done to us. Sometimes they're consequences of our own actions. Sometimes they're just plain accidents. Bad things happen unexpectedly to good people. God can take those unwanted journeys. When you say, this was not the plan, God, God can say, yeah, but don't worry. It's not over. This is not the end. Like, I've got more than this. I mean, come on, don't you trust me? There's always a future. There's always something better. I guess you could say that even when our plans have failed, plans A, B, C, D, E, and F have failed, and we think we are in an unredeemable spot, that may not have been the plan. But nothing can stop God's ultimate good plan. God can bring good out of whatever unwanted journey that you're on, whatever stretch of the road that you can't even see past. God says, I can work with this. This is not the end of the story. And it sure wasn't the end of Mary's story. Her less than ideal situation in Bethlehem, her being a young unwed mother, giving birth in a stable in Bethlehem, where they should have been able to have a new home and a fresh start. That situation, that unwanted journey, I mean, it had some other rough spots too. It got better. And then her journey included watching her son crucified. And I imagine then too she thought, God, this is not part of the plan. You brought me from Nazareth to Bethlehem through birth in a stable, on a refugee trip to Egypt and back to Nazareth. You can't have done all that for it to end here on a cross. That's not the plan. Only for God to say, I'm not finished. There's more to the plan. This is not the end of the story. Hang on. Nothing can stop God's good plan. I don't know where you are on your journey of faith, your journey with God. Perhaps you have been on this journey quite some time, but you feel a little lost. That happens. Perhaps you've wanted to start the journey. You've kind of been starting the journey, but you haven't had a chance to really give yourself to the journey and accept Christ. Or maybe you've been on the journey elsewhere and you're looking for a new place, you find yourself in a new location, and you want a new community with which to journey together. That's what we're here for. If you're in any of those places, if you would like to make a decision for Christ, or if you would like to take the next step in your journey of faith and you need some help with that, we would love to be here and join with you and walk with you. So if you'd like, you can share that with me as we sing our final hymn, or you can contact me during the week. You can visit about it at some other point. But we're here for you, and we would love to have you as fellow partners on this journey. Let us stand as you are comfortable and sing, thinking about the town of Bethlehem, O little town of Bethlehem.
Silent stars go by.
to see you all at 6 p.m. on Saturday the 24th and 10:30 a.m. Sunday the 25th, and enjoy together this beautiful holiday season. I hope you have an opportunity to share the love of God with someone this week, and that if you find yourself or someone you encounter finds themselves in an unwanted journey, you can know, you can say, it's not the end of the story. God's plan cannot be stopped, and God has good plans for us. Go in peace.